Saturday morning, about 3 a.m., we loaded my family up in the car and we drove to the West Virginia Riviera, Myrtle Beach. And I already knew what was going to happen when we get there. You probably have had a similar experience with your kids anytime you go anywhere, or really even just every day that you wake up. And it's this. It's just a non-stop barrage of questions. Can we go here? Can we do this? Can we go putt-putting? Can we eat here? Can I get this? Can I buy this? Can we do this? Non-stop for a solid week. And let me just tell you, I have figured this out in parenting, that the perfect answer in that situation is maybe. Maybe. And here's why. I'm going to put y'all into some game right now. I'm going to help y'all out. If you say maybe, it's not a no so they don't get mad at you. If you say maybe, it gives them hope, but gives you an out. That's a beautiful thing as a parent. They're still happy, and you've committed to nothing. It's amazing. So I just went maybe, because, and here's why. Like, I have to say maybe because I really don't know what the future holds in a lot of situations, right? And I learned this about my kids early on. Like, if you say yes, you better mean yes. Because, like, if you say yes, we're going to go putt-putting, and then it rains, you're a liar. As if I caused the rain. But, like, I say maybe because I'll be honest, sometimes 9 a.m. Scott has more energy than 5 p.m. Scott. Oh, can we go do this later? Maybe. Because honestly, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that time. I feel pretty good right now. I just woke up, just had my coffee, just had my Alani. But I don't know what later holds. And so it's hard for me to say yes to somebody when I don't know, and especially if I know that they're going to hold it against me, because the last thing I want to do is tell my kids yes and disrupt or interrupt their trust that they have in me. Because when you say yes, they're thinking, you're going to do it. You better do it because you said yes. We're going to make you miserable until you do it. If you done said yes. And now I say that because I want us to look at an aspect of God today that I think is pretty incredible, especially if you've been struggling a little bit, maybe struggling in your faith, struggling with doubt, struggling with fears, whatever it might be. Here's an amazing thing about God as our Father, is that God doesn't have to say maybe. God doesn't have to say maybe. He's not going, well, I don't really know what's ahead. I don't really know how I'm going to feel later. I don't really know what the weather is going to be. I don't really know what no, God never has to say maybe, and that makes him a father that can be trusted. Right? Like God he's never wondering. Nothing ever occurred to God. Like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Like he's never in the same situation as we are to go. I don't know what I can say because maybe yes, maybe no. He never has to say maybe. Like God has never once, the reason why you can trust him, never once has God failed. Never once has he ever failed you. Even I know, I'm not saying everything always goes great and that it always looks really good. I'm just saying God has never failed. And no matter what it is, through all the highs, through all the lows, God is a God that can be trusted. And I hope that this builds your faith a little bit. Like, he's never come up short. He's never missed. He is a father that can be trusted. And I know sometimes when we say that in church, that we call God our Father. I heard this from a lady Friday night, and I really appreciated the honesty, because maybe it's where you're at. She said, I had trouble calling God Father because I didn't have a good father. And I know that's true for a lot of people. That, like, when we say God's a father, they go, man, I hope he ain't like mine. That's the truth. Like some of us, we had good dads, and that's amazing, but that's not everyone's reality. So when I say God is a God that can be trusted, you go, I don't know, because the only other father I ever knew, I couldn't trust. He would break his word. He would say he's going to show up, and then he never showed up. He did say he was going to take us to go do that. And so I know that can be a tricky situation, but I want to show you today that God really is the Father that you can trust. And we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 5. We're jumping back in. Those of you that are kind of new with us, we studied 1 Samuel for 27 weeks last year. We're on the front half of 2 Samuel this summer. We're in chapter 5 at this point. And so let me get you caught up on the grand scheme of where we've been. We met a guy named David in 1 Samuel who, around age 15, the prophet Samuel anointed him to be the king of all of Israel. The problem was, at that time, there was another king named Saul who had a grudge against David, and he ended up chasing David out of town for more than a decade, where David had to live outside of the bounds of Israel. Things got so bad at one point, he went and lived with his enemies, the Philistines. You remember the story of David and Goliath? Goliath was a Philistine, and David got so desperate at one point, he went and lived with Goliath's people. Like, that's how bad things had got. He's supposed to be the anointed king of Israel, and he's on the run, living outside of the bounds of Israel. And we learned a couple of weeks ago in the first week of the series that eventually King Saul was killed in battle, which kind of paves the way for David to ultimately get where God had told him that he was going to go. But there was a problem with that. There was like a civil war between the house of Saul and the house of David that lasted for quite some time, that kind of threw a wrench in David's rise to power. See, David, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, David became king of Judah, which is the southern part of Israel, but he had not yet ascended to the king of Israel, where he was overseeing everything the way that God said that it was going to happen. And David, through all the ups and downs and everything, we're just kind of waiting. And we found out last week through this 7.5-year civil war between the people that were still loyal to Saul and the people that were loyal to David, that King Ishbosheth dies. Some more battle takes place, and then the stage is finally set for David to ultimately get where God has promised him that he was going to be. We read this in 2 Samuel chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. If you want to follow along digitally, you can hit the QR code in front of you. It says, then, meaning after all of this 7.5 years of civil war, the tribes of Israel, there's 12 tribes that represented the 12 tribes of the sons of Jacob, who we come to know as Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron. That's that perfect city God led him to, where he was leading the people of Judah. It says he went to the Hebron and told him, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. They're now looking back on history. Even though they had not been faithful to David, some of them had no doubt been part of the armies that had chased David out of town. They go, when we look back at it, Dave, we think you were actually the one that was actually in charge. You were the one that was really leading the forces. And then they said, and we kind of remember this thing that God told you through the prophet Samuel, that one day you will be the shepherd of my people, you will be Israel's leader. After all this time, if you've been with us for the last couple of years, working through 1 and 2 Samuel, we covered David being anointed early last summer. It's the middle of August a year later. And now Israel's coming around. You might be the guy. So, and I know it may not seem like that's a long time in the text to go and in fact, in real time, we're talking somewhere around 22 years of waiting. Around 22, 23 years of waiting to ultimately get where God called him to. And I'm just wondering, during the 22, 23 years, whatever it actually was, that while David was on the run, running for his life, he's an innocent man, but he's being treated as if he's a traitor and a villain. I wonder if there were some nights that David and his men, they're camped out in these caves, they're trying to hide from Saul and his men, that maybe some doubt and some fear started to creep in. And going, I know, God, that you said one day I would be king of Israel. But I'll be honest, there's a lot of moments where it doesn't really feel like it. It really, there's just a lot of time where my life doesn't look like what I thought it was going to look like when you said that you were going to do that. And I know that there's some folks in here that's your story right now. That you're in a waiting period. You're in a period where things are really tough. You're in a period where it doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like, and you're wondering, I don't know, God, are you really going to come through? Are you really true to your word? Are you really someone that can be trusted? Because there's been so many other people that have let me down in life, and honestly, God, if I'm just being really honest, it feels like maybe you're becoming one of those people because things just aren't what I thought they were going to be. I wonder if David had any moments like that through this whole 22-year saga where his faith and his trust in God began to waver. And I wonder if you're in here today and maybe that's a little bit of what you're facing, that life has kind of beaten a little bit of the trust and the confidence and the faith out of you because you're going, God, I thought it was going to be like this, but it's not. It's been so much more difficult. It's been like I know you good church-going folks would never be this honest to say this, but like sometimes maybe you, not you, me, maybe things get so tough I wonder, like, are we just wasting our time? I know that you would never think that. You're way too godly for that. But like in the back of my mind, sometimes these doubts creep in when things aren't looking good, and I'm going, God, I don't know. And David is waiting 22 years. God, are you going to come through? And maybe you've been waiting a couple months. Maybe you've been waiting a couple of years. Maybe you've been waiting a couple of decades. You're wondering, like, God, are you going to come through in my family? Are you going to have a breakthrough in my finances, in my mental health, in my spiritual health, like in my friendships, in my relationships? Are you going to come through in my marriage, God? Like, I'm just wondering, are you ever going to show up and do everything that's been promised? Like, are you going to do it? Because I'm getting tired of waiting, and everything feels like such a struggle. And I know that David probably had those moments. And there was even this moment that we studied 2 weeks ago where like David becomes the king of Judah, which is the southern part of Israel, where there's like this little bit of hope. And when you see David become the king of Judah, you get this little bit of like, oh my goodness, it's starting to happen. It's starting to happen. But then we read like 7.5 more years before he gets where God ultimately wanted him to get. Another, like he has to like have this ray of hope. Man, I'm the king of Judah. And then after year 1, it's like, it's still not what God said was going to happen. And then year 2 and year 3, and you're like, is it ever going to happen? 7.5 years. More doubt. More shaking of the faith. Things don't look good. But then look what happens, verse 3. So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant between the Lord and the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel. After all this time, after all the waiting, after all the fighting, after all the running, after all the doubt, after all the fear, after all the wondering, God, where are you at? When are you going to come through? When are you going to do what you said you're going to do? They anoint him king of Israel. And it tells us David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 40 years in all, and he reigned over Judah from Hebron for 7 years and 6 months, and then from Jerusalem he reigns over all Israel and Judah for 33 years. That is such a long process for David to go through, and all the ups and all the downs and all the wondering. 22 years. And I know some of you've been waiting like a couple months or a couple years, and it feels like 22 years, doesn't it? That you've been wondering, like, when are things going to get better? When are things going to get how God told me they were going to be? You've been waiting a couple months, and it feels like a couple years. I just went through this actually recently. Sort of like last November, I was starting to have some health issues that progressively like were getting a little bit more concerning for me. And so I finally go and see my doctor, and they're like, oh yeah, you need to go see this sort of specialist. And so I called the specialist, and they're like, yeah, our first opening's like 4 months from now. And I'm like, Is anyone else concerned about the timing of all of this? Like, why does it take so long to get in? They're like, yeah, and then it's going to take this many months to get in, then another this many months before you can have the procedure to find out if anything's going on. I'm like, I feel like nobody cares. I'm like, I need some answers, and I only had to wait like 10 months to get answers, and I know, but I'll be honest, it felt like 22 years. Yeah. Like, and I know that's where you're at, because when you're the one in the middle of the waiting period, it feels so long. Like, when is the breakthrough coming? I mean, it took me 10 months to find out that, from what I can tell, I'm fine. 10 months. But now, I want to put something into perspective for you. David waited 22 years for this promise of being king to come to fruition. But there was actually another group of people that were waiting for him a lot longer than he waited for that position. See, in Genesis chapter 49, Jacob, that we've come to know as Israel, he has 12 sons who represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And as Jacob is preparing to depart this life, he's going to say a blessing over every one of these kids. And in the Jewish thought of that day, that this blessing is what they're calling on God, and what God is like, yes, this is what's going to happen in their lives. And there was this prophecy over the people of Judah, over the tribe of Judah. In Genesis 49, it says this: Judah, your brothers will praise you, and you will grasp your enemies by the neck, and all your relatives will bow down before you. Judah, my son, is a young lion that has finished eating its prey. Like a lion, he crouches and lies, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter, meaning someone that's going to rule, someone that's going to be a kingly figure, will not depart from Judah. That's the tribe that the king that they're speaking of is going to come from, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, and the one whom all nations will honor. There's this prophecy in Genesis chapter 49 where Jacob is essentially telling his son Judah that from your tribe there will come a king. Now think about this. This is 660 years roughly before David is crowned king. 660 years is a lot longer than 22 years. That the people of Judah were promised, from your tribe will come a king. The interesting thing is that when Jacob speaks these words over his son Judah about what will come from his family one day, Israel doesn't even have a king. They're not operating as a monarchy. 660 years later. But before they get to that, don't forget this. When Israel finally goes to Samuel, says, Samuel, tell God we want a king. God's like, you all don't want a king. Remember, we studied this early last year in 1 Samuel. He's like, you don't want a king. You don't want to be like everybody else. They say, give us a king. So God is going to give them a king. And I imagine the people of Judah are going, wow, I think our time has finally come. Our time has finally come. God said that when we have a king, he's going to be from the tribe of Judah. That's going to give us all the accolades. That's going to come with all this prestige. Like the king is going to be one of our people. And then what does God do early in 1 Samuel when he anoints the first king of Israel? He chooses someone from the tribe of Benjamin. Oh, sorry, Judah. It's just not your time. You ever felt like that before? Oh, I'm sorry, it's just not your time. But I thought you were going to, I thought now was my time. I thought things were going to get better. No, I'm sorry, it's not your time. And so the wait for Judah continues until David, who is from the tribe of Judah, is crowned in 2 Samuel chapter 5. 22 years of waiting seems like nothing compared to 660 years of waiting. But listen, what this shows us, that if God can call his shot 660 years before, you can trust him. That's right. He's never once failed you, and he will not start today. That is right. He is a God that can be trusted. Amen. That you can put your full faith, like he has never failed and never going to fail you. Even what sometimes looks like failure ends up being flipped up on its head, and we see what God is doing all along. He is a God that can be trusted. I didn't even plan on sharing this story until I walked up on stage first service, but let me just give you a real practical example of how faithful God is. So we have a partner, a ministry partner called Kids Around the World. You've heard a lot about it this summer because we had a team go down to Ecuador, and we have adopted this little village called Los Chakras. Well, that whole partnership started back in, I think, 2021. Pastor Cheryl and I flew into Ecuador to go and visit some of these sites to see if this was a good ministry opportunity for us. So they're taking us from village to village because their goal is to get you to adopt one of these villages. And they take us to this village called Los Chakras, who is now our partner. And we're sitting in this little tiny church, a hut essentially. And we come to find out that this church is in debt, $2,500. Because they don't own this building. They bought the land beside. They paid someone to flatten it out, and now they're just trusting that God is going to give them a building on that land and that they're not going to have to worry about one day the people that own the building that they're in coming in and telling them to get out. And so we're just having this time of worship in this church. This pastor's sharing his heart, and they owe $2,500. And up on their wall, there was a little whiteboard that showed their offering for the last 2 weeks. Their offering for 2 weeks was a combined $11. They owed $2,500. That probably feels like waiting 660 years.
Yeah.
Like $11, $2,500. So as we're sitting there praying and worshiping, I knew that God was calling us as a church to pay the debt of this facility off so we could be more generous in mission work here locally and around the world. And God spoke to me on that day, and he said, Scott, if Southridge will take care of this church's debt, $2,500, I'll take care of yours. I said, okay, God. I came home. I told you all about it. $2,500 like that. We send it. We pay their debt off. You may not know this if you're new around here. We are in a giving campaign that started in October of 2023, where we're trying to pay our facility off. That's $1,060,000 is where it started. God said, I'll pay that off for you. Here we are. 2025, August, that number is now under $650,000. God, I mean, if he said he's going to do it, he's going to do it. You understand there's going to be a Sunday that I'm going to get to stand up here and tell you that this church is debt-free and the time of radical generosity is right around the corner. I can't wait for that day, but I know that it's coming. It's not if it happens. We stopped saying if around here because when God said it was going to happen, we could guarantee because his yes is a yes. He doesn't have to say maybe.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Fast forward, actually rewind now, about a month and a half, 2 months ago. Sitting in an elder meeting, and I was telling the elders that our facility had sprung a couple leaks in the roof. And it was getting to the point where it was like, I think we have to do something about it because here we are trying to pay this building off, but if we don't do something about the roof, then what shape is the building going to be in by the time that it's debt-free? Because the goal all along was like, hey, we got to get past For the Future campaign, pay the building off, then we'll take care of the roof because we had been given figures that were upwards of like $140,000 to get the roof taken care of. And I go, so these new leaks pop up, and so I talked to the elders, and I'm telling them, I'm like, I think that our only option is going to be to pause the For the Future campaign, interrupt our momentum, and focus on the roof. I don't think we're going to have any other options. And so we decided that's the route we're going to go. We call a roofing company, hey, come out, will you give us some information? The first roofing company that comes out looks at our building and goes, I think that you have storm damage up on your roof. And I was like, I don't really know about that, to be honest. I just know that there's some new leaks. He said, you may want to call your insurance company and see what they have to say. Call the insurance company. They send somebody out the following Monday. Insurance adjuster looks at us. Southridge Church, you're getting a new roof. God's a God that says yes. He doesn't have to say maybe. And how he chooses to do what he chooses to do is totally up to him. I just know that the time of saying if and the time of complaining about waiting, of whatever it is, I just know that we need to be a church that trusts God. Because he has been so unbelievably faithful to us over and over and over again. Just unbelievable. You know this story, Judah is waiting 660 years to see a king come from their line, which is a cool story that David ends up being that king. There's an even cooler storyline going on. If you go to Genesis 49, give me the last verse of that, verse 10. Look in detail at this prophecy that David initially fulfills. He says, the scepter, meaning a king, will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants. That actually means that there's going to be coming a king from the tribe of Judah that's going to reign forever. And the next line says, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all nations will honor. See, the prophecy says there's someone coming from the line of Judah that's going to reign forever, and they're not just going to be the king of Judah, they're not just going to be the king of Israel, they're going to be the king of all creation, that all the nations will one day bow to. You know that actually God called his shot again, because not 22 years, not 660 years later, but 1,650 years later comes onto the scene of history a man named Jesus of Nazareth, who is that king, who's going to reign forever, whose kingdom will never come to an end, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who proved that he can be trusted because even death in the grave could not hold him. God called his shot 1,700 years before the true king of all creation made his way onto the scene. And that right there is why you can trust God. You're wondering, I don't know, it doesn't look good. Listen, I guarantee it didn't look good when they stripped him naked and hung him in between two criminals. It definitely didn't look good when they wrapped his body in a burial cloth and laid him in a tomb and rolled the stone over and oh, that's the end of the story. Oh, it didn't look good. And there was a bit of a waiting period there on that Saturday when they're going, well, there he is. We thought he was a Messiah. We thought he was a big deal. We thought he was the one that we were waiting on, and here he is, dead and in a tomb. But see, he had told them earlier that week that he was going to die, be laid in a tomb, and on that third day, he'd be raised to life. And on Saturday, they're thinking, he's still in there, man. I don't know. I don't know if we can trust him. But it was on Sunday when they saw his nail-pierced hands, when they saw him living and breathing right in front of them, that they knew that this was a God that could be trusted. Because it didn't look good for a while, but God can still be trusted. God can still be trusted. So I don't know what the storm in your life looks like. I don't know the waiting period that you've been going through, the struggles, the bad diagnoses, the problems in your marriage, the problem with your kids, and you're wondering, is there ever going to come a breakthrough? Can I just remind you real quick of that prophecy in Genesis 49? There's a king who sits on the throne forever. And so you need to make sure that you do not forget in those moments of weakness and doubt and fear, and they will come, do not forget who's actually on the throne. Do not forget who is overseeing all of human history and is intimately involved in your life in ways that you may never even come to understand. We have a God that we can trust. Hell, death, and the grave could not stop him from keeping his word. And if he did all of that, he'll do it for you. He'll do it for you. You can trust him. I pray today that you leave with a whole mess load of faith that you didn't have when you came. That you have this confidence in God that erases the doubts and the fears, and even though they might come, you will have a faith to combat those. Maybe you're in here today, you've never placed your faith and trust in Jesus. I want you to know you can trust him. He will forgive you of your sins and make you into a new creation the way you could be with him forever.